Who knows what Linux is? Have you ever heard of it, or you're just not sure what it is?
I've heard of it.
So, we'll start with a little bit of Linux and Linux. Linux was an OS developed by Andrew Tannenbaum. He's Tannenbaum?
It's Christmas tree, basically.
Yeah. So, Mr. Christmas Tree wrote a book about operating systems. And to be able to demonstrate his principles within the operating systems, he wrote Linux. And this was studied all across universities all over the world. So, there's this 21-year-old guy sat down and said, you know, I can do something better. And his name was Linus.
Linus Torvalds.
Yeah. So Linus used the Linux computer to develop Linux, the Linux kernel. He started working, the biggest differences between Linux and Linux is that Linux uses the microkernel and Linux uses the monolithic kernel. Now, who knows the differences?
The difference basically between a microkernel and a monolithic kernel is the monolithic kernel has everything is in it. Every driver, everything you need to run the system is inside the kernel.
Which?
On the monolithic. And then on the microkernel, it's just a very basic operating system, and it loads all that other stuff as module. Which you can still do with the Linux monolithic kernel, or the module. It's got a lot in it. Like the BSD kernel is a microkernel.
Okay. So, April of 91, Linus started working on Linux. This was just his little side project outside of class. And then in August 25th, 91, he announced it to the Linux user group on Usenet that he has this new project that he's working on. And here's the whole post that he put on there. Now, I know he made it small because I want to put it all in there, but basically he's saying it's just a hobby. It's not really become anything big, but here if you want to play with it, it's free. And then we can see where it's come now. So in version 1, he at his university, he got over 100 developers working on it. And that was March 14th to 94 is when they came out with version 1. The version 1.0 only supported single processor i386. Once, I think it was 1.4 or something further on, is where they started supporting the Spark processor and a couple other ones. But the big difference with 2.0 is that it was SMP, so it's multiple processors, and the support was a lot more for the processors, a lot more processors. 2.0 is probably pretty much what everybody's using right now. Not 2.0, but 2. something. Because it was only this year in June, or July 22nd is when they came out with 3.0. There was 41 releases, you can see 41 releases of the 2. version. Ubuntu's still on like 36 or 38, I think, is the latest update that I pulled. So they're not even up to 3.0. I did install Arch Linux on a VM, and that's running the 3. kernel. But just so I can say.
Okay, well, I think Ubuntu 11.10 is 3. No?
11.10, I don't know, it may be.
Yes.
Debian is also on 3.0.
Is it not? So here's the distribution. This is just a real light example of the different distributions of when they came out. So first couple are not even around anymore. The only thing that out of these first ones out in 392 is SLS, and that transformed into Slackware. Slackware still around. Debian 93, they started off. 94 is when Red Hat, and then Slackware, SUSE was a branch off of Slackware. It said it was spelled right. I checked the spell check. It lied to me.
Well, that's a robust distribution. Distribution.
Right. So I highlighted the ones that were most popular that you'll probably know, and then in the notes on the presentation, I have almost the entire full history of the non-branches. So just all the main ones that started off on their own. So I don't have Ubuntu on here because it's a branch off of Debian. And I don't have. Yeah, I tried to print the big poster of it, but my printer wasn't doing the poster size correctly. Huh? That's that was after 2003, isn't it?
Post 2003?
I think it was.
Tons and tons of people.
I think it was 94 or 05. I just couldn't fit it. Puppy is what runs on PS3s, right? Coyote, I don't know if you guys get that one. It was a firewall distribution. You can run off of floppy.
I have a question going back to that. Why do you have something in red?
Those are the popular ones.
I was walking in the back.
Those are the ones that are popular that most people would know.
Yours is still hanging around too.
Right. Huh?
I've heard of Go.
So I pulled this off of the poster. I just scrolled back and forth until I kind of found lines. That's why I wrote it all down. So this is the poster I use. It's the old version from 2009, but I double checked it against the 2011 version that they just came out with, and it's still accurate. Not that, history doesn't change, so.
Well, yes, it does.
And then most of my information I pulled from Wikipedia, a different wiki, so. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about my Linux history, and then we can go on and have other people tell. So I had a class in 2001, and I loaded Red Hat, I think 3.0, onto a computer, and that was our little play machine during class. I got the 4.0 CDs and in 2002 and ran my own computer, but really didn't do much, a little web server maybe. And then 2003 is when I moved to Slackware, and then that's where I ran mail server and a web server. So everything I did for the first while was all just server based. I didn't run a desktop until 2006, and I used Ubuntu 6.4. This is one of my first desktop I used. And then most of my servers and everything I do now is either Debian based or Linux or Ubuntu. That's my history. Now, let's say what.
Ooh, me.
Let's start with man.
Okay. Good.
No, it's not. I don't know. It was in the winter between like 2001 and 2002.
And it climbed up
When I
to the
first,
first place.
no, it's when I first started to use Linux because Windows really started to really piss me off. No. Because I was still running 98, the blue screen of death was very prevalent in Windows 98, you guys remember it. So I was just really getting annoyed. I was looking for other stuff. So I was doing all kinds of searches for alternate OSs. I tried OS 2 to work for a while. I dropped back to DOS for a while. And then I found this thing called Linux. And it was great. Red Hat 9 was my first install and distribution and desktop and everything. And it was great. And then So I was using it for about a little over a year when I heard of this thing called Penguicon. And I found other people were actually using this stuff. And I went to Penguicon. And then I started coming to MDLug and I switched to SUSE. Because at that time in MDLug, SUSE was like the distribution you use. So I said, okay, since all these other guys are using it, I'll use it too, and that way they can help me out if I have a problem. So I switched to SUSE. I ran SUSE for a long time. Until the SUSE Novell purchase really irritated me. Because they signed that deal with Microsoft, so I decided I'm done with SUSE. And then I ran Ubuntu for a while. And then KDE really pissed me off. So I switched from Ubuntu to I'm not sure what. Straight Debian, that's it. I was running straight Debian for a long time. And now I'm running Debian Mint. And life is good.
So Debian Mint, is that the one with all the like, codecs?
Yes. Out of the box, all the codecs work. It's the most user-friendly desktop, in my opinion, that you will ever run. Is any of the mints. The mainstream mints are all based on Ubuntu, but I really don't like Ubuntu. So I'm using the mint, the Debian Mint, as opposed to the standard Mint. That's it. Go ahead, give me your turn.
Oh no.
So my first Linux experience when I was in college, I had a geeky friend of mine who was like, let me show you this thing. I can boot a whole different operating system right off the CD. And he slugs the Knoppix CD and it boots, and I was just like, it's still the exact same thing. It's stupid. Whatever. And like, I didn't think about anything about it for years. So I was living with my cousin, and she had this crappy old Windows computer, and she's running all the toolbars and all this crap. So I went through there and was changing all her settings to get her Windows machine to run better. And she bitched me. And I was like, I can't use this computer. As I remembered that, I wonder if that CD thing really does anything. And I actually bought a copy of Knoppix because I didn't know how else to do it. And was booting this whole thing. And I was like, dude, this is awesome. And then I realized, I can go to the library and actually get on real websites if I bring this CD with me. So I was doing it at the library, and I was doing it at work, and I was like, this is awesome. And then on that, there was a thing called Open Office. And I was like, well, what's open about it? And I started looking into what open source was. And me as a libertarian, free market, let's just all be free, everything, all of a sudden I just fell in love with the idea of coding, the idea of open source. And I was just like, GNU Linux is the way to go for everything. And it made me wake up a bunch of it's like, not just the government that can stop me from having my freedoms. The corporations stop me from having freedom too. And fight the man! And this fight the man thing got on me more and more and more. So then I was like, well, I need to install this on a machine. So I did some kind of search and took your quiz. It told me, well, due to your answer to this quiz, you should run Mandriva. So I ran Mandriva, and I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And I started messing around with this stuff, and then I discovered that everybody's like, well, you should use Ubuntu, because that's what everybody uses. So I used it, and I was like, this is really slow on my machine. But because of Ubuntu, I fell in love with the Aptitude Packet Manager. And I was like, apt-get is way easier than compiling from source, or UPRMI, or YAST, or anything. Like, apt-get is awesome. So then with me, all like, everything needs to be free. I was like, well, I better do Debian, because Debian's more free than Ubuntu. And I did that for a while, and then I got into the whole, now I'm the asshole who always says it's GNU Linux, not Linux. And fell in love with Rick Stallman, and now I pay my $60 to the Free Software Foundation, and I carry my bootable membership card in my wallet, just so I can say, I carry my operating system right here. So that's my story.
Close to your heart.
Yes.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry, what was your name? Just Jim. Okay, Jim. Okay. So throw some water on this guy. We got to cool him down a little bit. Okay, so I see another hand up. Oh, Gary's going to go first.
Yes. Oddly, well, to start with, I started with Amiga computers.
Amiga? That was a, okay.
which worked very well. But Amiga basically went, don't do it or we'll shoot, and did. So that company went under, and trying to keep your Amiga running was difficult. So for production, I had to fall back on Windows, which I already hated, because I used Amigas. And the difference between Windows and Amiga is the difference between a Model T and a Ferrari. Well, I've been using Windows 98 for a while.
Is that just the speed, or was that like the?
Just the way it works, period.
I mean, hand cranked as opposed to like
Yeah, hand crank as opposed to just works. I was so used to just works. I mean, unlike a lot of people here, I am not a computer programmer. I am not a coder. I am someone who uses the computer as a tool to do what I want to get done. And I want the computer out of my way, and I just want it to work. And Windows never gets out of your way. It's got to wave its hands and put itself in the middle of everything you do. Well, I bought a copy of SUSE 8 off the shelf, and I've been considering it, and then Windows went and made up my mind for me by dumping my TCP IP stack for the third time in a week. The correction of which required, of course, reinstalling Windows. And I realized I was going to have to do a cold install of Windows, strip it down, and build it back. And I said to myself, well, if I have to go to that kind of trouble, I'm going to try this Linux thing. So I did. And that was 2004, and I haven't looked back. It's been SUSE Linux ever since. I'm up to 11.4. I just reinstalled everything on both of my computers, my main production boxes, and a little laptop. And for the most part, Linux just works. Gets out of my way, let me do what I need to do. I spend less time fiddling. As I put it, I spend less time working on the computer, more time working with the computer. I don't want to spend time working on the computer. It's supposed to be the tool that lets me do work, not the thing I work on all the time to keep it working to the point I can work. And what can I say? Linux works better, works more consistently. How bad is Linux for working consistently? I have yet to find a computer clock that is entirely accurate. They all either lose or gain time. Don't know why, they do. Now I've got my particular distribution set up so they go out at the time signals from NOAA when I boot the computer. But I boot my computer so seldom that the machine will actually start to waver off like 10 to 15 minutes before I realize it and go correct the time. That is how seldom I actually boot the computer. It just worked. Months and months of time. No crashes, no problems, just works. I don't want anyone to say that about any version of Windows. And yes, I've used DOS. I actually like DOS 622. It's the best operating system Microsoft ever made.
Okay, thank you. Mike, did you want to?
Now, my experience with computers will predate them a little bit. I started with the Commodore, was working with VIC-20s and 64s. And of course, those were all using a version of BASIC that they actually brought out from Microsoft before Microsoft got smart and decided to release it to everybody. And I think, while it was still, 64s were still being used in the club, and we heard the first rumblings about the Linux operating system. And I think one guy even had a demo system running on a 64, which tells you how small you can actually get away with it at that time. It expanded a lot since then. But my real interest in it came after I had the demise of the Amiga Corporation. which, as Gary pointed out, went under. Not because there was anything wrong with the computer, but because two idiots at the top decided they wanted to make money. And so they sold off the company piece by piece until there wasn't a company left. And as a result, we had these beautiful computers with a wonderful operating system and no place to go with it. Eventually, a lot of us were forced to buy the dreaded Windows box. And believe me, I've learned to hate Windows, not because of anything intrinsically going wrong every week like Gary was having, but simply because the fact that anything I wanted to do after learning how to do it easily on Amiga, Windows usually told you that they couldn't do it that way. You had to do all this complicated mess, which usually drove you to grilling out your hair after about an hour. After 2 hours, you were willing to shoot the machine just to put yourself out of your misery. After 3 hours, you shoot yourself to put yourself out of your misery. It was that kind of a deal. Then, while I was at one of our DCG meetings, Gary was expounding on the fact that we now had Linux. And we were putting Linux onto our main club machines just to see what it was like. And one of the nice things about it is that we could put partitions up, put Linux on one side, Windows on the other, and after you compared them side by side, there was no comparison. The smart program was a Linux one. So I went ahead and got my first Ubuntu disk. And it turned out to be a godsend. Now, like a lot of people, I started off with the Ubuntu. Of course, then again, after the change over to the Ubuntu 4, we found that there were several problems with it, which meant it didn't work. So I went back to Ubuntu, which was the default version, and I found it worked really well for me. So what I did, I didn't need the Ubuntu for the most part. So I got rid of KDE, worked with Ubuntu, and I've been stuck with it ever since, and it works very well. Considering that my machine is not the latest or greatest or even the biggest, like 512 megs, and that's about as much as I'm going to get out of it right now. I'm doing pretty good with it. It does what I want to do, which is a lot of web surfing. It allows me to write things to Open Office. I don't have to worry about that split and screwed up all the time either. And for the most part, that keeps me happy.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. That was Mike. Who else? Who else wants to talk about their experience, personal history with Linux? Anybody? Okay, well, so mine will be pretty brief here, I think. I think because I'm dominating the rest of the conversation. So my name is Gib. When Tony had up here the list of all the old distributions and such, we had one called Big Drizzle. Big Drizzle was like one of the early ones. I remember going to one of the computer sales that they had. There was a guy, Richard Magny, that had these sales. That what it was,
That's the DCG. He was with us for a while.
yeah, and so there was software available. You could just pick up a disk for a few bucks. So I picked up this thing called the Drizzle, wondering what it was, loaded up on my system, and I was really thrilled I could actually get the video to run on my computer. I thought that was the greatest thing that had ever happened, So I think my personal recollection was that was 1991. But I can see it didn't come out until 92, so I may be off a little bit. It was obviously the early 90s. Okay, so is there anybody else who wants to talk about their Linux history? Okay, thank you very much.